I'd like to thank everybody for participating this evening. I know you have a lot of important things in your life, but this is important as well. And we'll try to be efficient and respectful of your time. As most, or if not all of you likely know, the origin of this collaborative is an executive order issued by the governor last summer. The order did not dictate a particular method or approach to running these collaboratives. It leaves that to individual communities to design and craft based on their own relevant factors. In Troy, we had a number of efforts already underway prior to the executive order, and I felt it was important not to lose the momentum on those matters. I felt it was important to get them completed or well along before embarking on this exercise. Simultaneously, I do not see that reinventing is an event as much as it is a process, and that's particularly true in a dynamic environment. So I'm not approaching this as an exercise that concludes once the report is submitted to the state. I don't at this time know the exact form it will take, but I do believe that there needs to be an ongoing and organized dialogue among those in the criminal justice system, the mental health and substance abuse communities, and the community at large, maybe others as well. And I think that's an absolute necessity if we're going to build enduring trust and effective responses to the needs of our community. So the PRRC, or what I'll refer to from now on as the collaborative, is but one step in the process, a process that started well before the summer and a process that will continue well after April 1st. As it happens, the chief and his leadership team have been engaged in a series of changes in the department since they assumed their roles. Much of that work was done this summer to advance important changes. I'll give you a few examples. We have reworked our use of force policies, and they are now consistent with the 8 can't wait principles. We have reworked our discipline policies so that they link more seamlessly with the newly reconstituted Police Objective Review Board. We have completed the New York State accreditation process, which only about 30% of police departments in New York State have accomplished. And it is one of the governor's recommendations. We have actually been accredited for 20 years. And this summer we went through the process, the reaccreditation process once again. We instituted reinstituted the emotionally distressed persons response training, EDPRT. This is an intense 40-hour training. Our last class was held in December. We can all reflect back on the news stories that we've heard this year of tragic incidents around the country between police officers and individuals in emotional or mental distress. We want to make sure that our officers have the right tools in these sorts of situations, and this is an important training in that regard. To date, about 50% of the department has completed that training, and we've got 2 more sessions planned for this year. We've rewritten policies and procedures for the Objective Review Board to ensure that it will be a citizen-led initiative, and we have recruited new members for the board. We are on the cusp of deploying body-worn cameras. They have been acquired. They're being set up now by the vendor. And I think that there are a few other things as well. I think many of these steps you will find in the work plans of other departments. So we are a step ahead in that regard. So now we move forward building on that work. The members of this committee, the steering committee, were chosen because they bring experience either in the criminal justice system or because of their work with those who frequently interact with the police and the criminal justice system. They were asked to serve on the committee to help us imagine how ideas brought to us by the public might be actualized to create greater transparency and trust, leading to a more welcoming and safer community for all. I thank them for the time they're committing to this process. At this time, I'd like to introduce our Chief of Police, Brian Owens, to say a few words. Chief.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, everyone. I'm Brian Owens, and I'd like to thank everyone for being a part of this meeting tonight. Most of you know me and Deputy Chief Dan DeWolf personally and professionally. We have worked together with many of you throughout our careers and even more intensely in our current role. The Detroit Police Department is a full-service, New York State accredited law enforcement agency. Some of you in this meeting have likely interacted with the men and women of our department, whether in the ordinary course of your life, as a result of a call for service, or during a serious incident. We are fortunate to have caring members who are willing and dedicated to serving others. We demonstrate this through our actions and attitudes every hour of every day during thousands of interactions each year. We are grateful for the strong support of community members and strive not only to keep people safe from crime, but to help people in ways big and small. We're also fortunate to have our partners on the committee. We're especially thankful for the people and resources that these organizations offer to the people of Troy and beyond. Well, this meeting and the ones to follow in the next several weeks are in the context of the New York State Executive Order 203. The Troy Police Department has had ongoing conversations and collaborated with our community, including the neighborhood and organizations represented by the speakers and committee members. This has happened over many years and in some cases decades. We have evolved over time to better serve the people of our city, and we welcome this ongoing dialogue to find ways to improve our police department. We also look forward to continuing to listen to members of our community on ways to address issues of crime, disorder, and injustice. Our goal is to make Troy a healthier, better, and safer city. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Just a few more comments and then we'll start the dialogue. I'll note, and you'll see that the schedule going forward envisions two types of general meetings. The first are meetings where anyone can sign up to speak. There will be 3 general open meetings. And then there are 3 meetings that are reserved for affinity groups. These are groups who have organized around community issues, including policing and public safety. And we are particularly interested in giving these groups an opportunity to share with us the benefit of their thinking and discussions on these matters. Tonight is an affinity group meeting, and tonight's affinity groups sprang up this summer in response to violence in their neighborhood. They are truly grassroots efforts and they remain active and committed to this cause. And then finally, I want people to understand that there are a number of ways to communicate with the committee. Public meetings are only one. We actually do encourage written comments and they can be mailed or emailed to us. That information is available on our website. All of that material will be shared with the committee and become part of the record. So if public speaking isn't your thing, you can still share your thoughts with us. Actually, written comments are very valuable because what happens in conversation is sometimes you forget what was shared. At least with written comments, you can go back and look at that again. On the website, we've also listed 4 questions. We're not holding people to those exactly, but they're meant to provoke forward-thinking comments and ideas. So again, I'd like to thank everybody in advance for your participation and your critical thinking. And at this time, I'd like to go ahead and introduce our facilitator for these meetings, Tamara Gatchell. Tamara runs her own company called Creative Cadence, and over the years has done a good deal of work with Fred Miller of Khalil Jamison. And I think many of you know Fred, and that's exactly how we met Tamara. So Tamara's been extremely helpful in helping us put this together. And so at this time, I will turn it over to Tamara. Tamara?
Thank you, Mayor. So I'm going to just touch on the agenda really quickly. We had our opening comments from the mayor, from Chief Owens. I'm going to go through some process guidelines, and then we're going to move into our first affinity group meeting with the Troy Coalition of Black Leaders. So John, I don't know if you want to share the slide deck and we can look at the agenda. What we'll do is after the presentation, we'll also have time for questions and answers with the committee. And the way that we'll do that is we'll just go alphabetically and we'll start with the first committee member. We'll call on them and then just say, do you have a question or do you have a comment that you'd like to share? And if you don't, you can pass. If you do, you can ask a question and we'll just go alphabetically through the list If we go to the next slide, John. And if there's time left at the end, then we will come back and go through another round of questions. And then we'll wrap up around 8 o'clock and have 15 minutes for the committee to do some debrief. So just to touch on some process notes for tonight's meeting. For committee members and presenters, if you can mute when you're not speaking, and if you're on a phone, if you can use *6 to mute and unmute. We have a chat feature that's working this evening if you are connected via Zoom. So you can send chat feedback and that will be shared with the committee after the meeting. And it will be made part of the public record. So just know that if you want to comment via chat, it'll be part of the public record. There will be no public comments at this meeting, but as the mayor mentioned, we have 3 public forums coming up that are set for the 10th, 17th, and 22nd. They all happen from 6:30 to 8. And registration is important if you want to attend. You register to come via Zoom. And if you want to speak to the committee, there's a special form that you have to use to sign up. Something to note is that that sign up has to happen by 3 p.m. the day of the public forum. And you can find all that information on the website. You can also find the upcoming Affinity group meetings and the public forums listed there. They're being recorded and they'll be posted on the website. So if we just go to the next slide. Again, as the mayor mentioned, these are the ways that you can communicate with the committee through email, postal mail, and the public forums. And you'll find these questions listed on the website. So at this point, I'd love to turn this over to Renee Powell, the president of the Troy branch of the NAACP. And she is going to introduce the other members of the Troy Coalition of Black Leaders. So Renee, I'll turn it over to you. Renee, you're on mute.
I was following instructions and I muted myself. Oh, okay. As Ms. Gatchell said, my name is Renee Powell. I'm president of the Troy branch of the NAACP. And I am glad to be here with you this afternoon to introduce to you a group that is newly formed and within the city of Troy. And the name of the group is the Troy Coalition of Black Leaders. And the mission of this group is to create a people of color agenda for the city of Troy that will act as a guide for social justice. At this time, I would like to also share with you that this group took the initiative to meet with the mayor and some of the administrators about the recent violence that happened during the summer of 2020. And so a subgroup of the TCBL, and that's what I'll refer to the coalition, met with the city administrators to discuss ways in which we could help to prevent more crime or more violence, more killing of our Black and brown children and members of the community. So at this time, I would like to introduce to you the subgroup of the TCBL group that met with the city administrators to discuss this. And so I will ask them each to introduce themselves. And we'll start with Deborah.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. My name is Deborah Garrett. I think I know everybody on the call. I was Troy Council for a little while for District 2. My most important job is being a mom of 4. And I also serve as the co-advocate for the New York State Charter Parent Association. What else am I affiliated with? I'm a part of the ARC after school program. I sit on that board. I also sit on the Oakwood board. I work with Team Hero, Troy Look. I'm just a big advocate for helping youth in the city of Troy. And I think that says a lot about me.
Okay, thank you, Deborah. Next is Kevin. Kevin, could you introduce yourself, please?
Hi, good evening, everybody, and thank you for inviting me to this. Kevin Pryor, organizer, activist, Troy Look. Here I'm representing the TC Black leaders this evening. So thank you for having me.
Okay, thank you. Next would be Steve. Steve, could you introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone. I'm Steven Figueroa, community leader, community organizer, director of Team Hero. And I'm just here. I appreciate you guys for having me here. And I'm just here to give input and make a difference in Troy.
Great. And of course, I'm also a part of this group, the coalition group. And again, I'm president of the NAACP. I also sit on the committee of this collaborative. And so I wanted to leave the last person because he's going to be the spokesperson for TCBL group tonight. And that would be Jerry Ford. Jerry, could you introduce yourself? And I'll turn the floor over to you after your introduction.
Blessed evening, everyone. My name is Jerry Ford. I wear a lot of different hats in the community. I am a deacon of United Ordained Church, the founder of Team Hero, the teen volunteer coordinator at the Boys and Girls Club, volunteer at Detroit Central Little League. And tonight I come to you as a member of the Troy Coalition of Black Leaders, to what I represent. Just to go ahead and go into the presentation, the Troy Coalition of Black Leaders comprise of active Black leaders who are doing work in the city of Troy that include, but not limited to, Team Hero, the NAACP, and Troy Look. The coalition was created in response in the rise of killings and the mistreatment of Black and brown people in our city. The goal was to develop a plan for the people of color and a guide to social justice actions around critical issues and in underserved and minority communities in the city of Troy. Now, although the members of the coalition are affiliated with other organizations, the TCBL is a standalone coalition of Black leaders, and our goal is to achieve social justice. I do want to voice our disagreement with the makeup of the PRRC. When you look at the governor's executive order, there was a specific reason why he put this forth. And it was due to the deaths of individuals, may they rest in peace, Sean Bell, Philando Castrillo, Antonio Rose, Ahmaud Arbery, Tamir Rice, Oscar Grant, Trayvon Martin, just to name a few. And we feel that in order for them to have a proper voice, that there should have been more individuals that looked like them that sat on this collaborative. And so we just wanted to make sure that that was known and that was said. Now, during the presentation, when I mentioned the word community, I'm referring to people of color and physical location. The criminal justice system is heavily impacted by bias of policing agenda, as well as outdated judicial precedents that negatively impact Black people at a higher rate than any other race. The national and state data shows it is largely driven by racial disparities, which directly obstruct and deconstruct our minority communities. So the executive order, which I mentioned, focuses on the executive order focused on the examine of law enforcement in 21st century is just one step of what should be assessed to create a safe environment for all. Policies that deal with economic, political, and social opportunities for Black residents in all areas need to be examined as well. In response to New York State policing reform and reinvention collaboration, there are 3 areas that the TCBL proposes immediate addressing and improving the equity in the criminal justice system serving Troy that will result in the reimagining and reforming of law enforcement system for a better Troy. The first will be transparency with law enforcement. The establishment of an intentional relationship with the chief of police and the district attorney. This relationship should establish an active diversion program for the youth and for a reentry program for those who are ex-offenders, for example. The establishment of a functioning police objective review board with subpoena authority. Education in the community on their rights when dealing with law enforcement. Our desire is to make it home in every interaction, to put the information on the rights of community members with the seal of endorsement and to make it clear and distributed throughout the community, and to work with community advocacy organizations to challenge and change laws that do not work for our community. For example, the hiring processes that hinders creating diversity in the law enforcement agencies. Area 2, improving community relationships, accountability, systematic racism. You can't fix what you don't have knowledge of. We all have biases. It is what you do with it that matters. Law enforcement cannot use discrimination and other preferences to oppress a community by limiting the opportunity that they have and harassment. Make it mandatory that the police department participates in diversity development and equity training. Ending disparately treatment of Black and white people. We need to examine the treatment of all the races for the same offenses. Every officer should be mandated to do walking details so they know the communities that they serve. Once again, establishing a functioning police objective review board with subpoena authority and the implementation of street and body cameras to make footage in its unredacted form as needed. And the third area is trust, including community leaders and members that represent the community that is disproportionately impacted by law enforcement and their practices and procedures in the hiring and promotion process of law enforcement employees. More engagement with the community, with the community's people by sponsoring teams, intentionally engaging the community and the people and the youth in all conversations. Collecting data to provide demographic reports that show the activity that is most concerning in the Black and brown communities, good and bad. We need to know this information. Using law enforcement systems for criminal situations. Use in law enforcement systems in criminal situations. The reallocation of funds to create a level that can triage the proper type of response for the call. For example, a welfare call would dispatch a committee with mental health components, child welfare, a community service officer, and officers available for assistance. So just an officer wouldn't respond to certain calls that require more attention, such as in a child welfare situation or a mental health crisis. Database for analysis to monitor the activity of the arrest, types of call by race, gender, orientation, by the situation, and the resulting Troy Police Department responses. In summary, timely completion and investment of projects in the Black community that are lacking. An assessment of the investment in the community's needs for the good quality of life is essential. At the present, the optics are inequities, among the various white and non-white communities in our city. Timeliness in reviewing those community status should address the inequalities that affect public safety, health, and the quality of life. Now, as the mayor stated in his introduction of the meeting, we all know that this is an ongoing process. What we are presenting today is an outline and of our understanding, a request for reimagining and reconstructing the police law enforcement system. We understand that the procedures and the intent for policing communities, predominantly Black and Brown, are outdated. Tactics that are being used and allowed have been deemed inhumane, and the Troy PD has mandated that specific techniques are against policy. But how are officers that continue to use these abusive techniques being held accountable? Although the policies and procedures have evolved to address the times, the intentions remain questionable when we declare known that there is a such thing called the blue culture. Administrators need to stop hiding behind the union and take corrective actions to protect and serve all the people of the city of Troy. Adding diversity and inclusion and mental health components. Today's society and population look different than it did 10 years ago. We know better, so we must do better. And we do not have all the answers tonight, but we are here to solve these problems with everyone coming together. The encouraging point is that we know that this is long overdue, and now it's time to take a stand. Lastly, the coalition has a concern, once again, for the makeup of the committee, and we just want to make that known. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, thank you, Jerry. Tamara, do we want to go into the question part of this? I think that's the end of the presentation.
Yes, I was just going to ask, is there anyone else that's here that has anything else from the Coalition of Black Leaders? Anyone else like to add anything before we go into question and answer? Thank you, Jerry.
Welcome. You're welcome.
So what we'd like to do is have the committee have a chance to ask questions or to comment. And what we'd like to do is start, Kathy, again, we're going to go alphabetically. And if you could just introduce yourself and say where you're from, and then if you have a question. And if you don't, you can pass and we can go to the next committee member.
Sure. Good evening. I'm Kathy Alonge Coons, and I serve as the Commissioner of Mental Health in Rensselaer County. And Jerry, thank you so much for your vision regarding the including mental health workers in response to welfare checks and other mental health calls. And I'm curious as to some of what you might have envisioned with that kind of a team, and whether or not you think it always needs to involve law enforcement, or if there could be a mental health response that perhaps could be leveraged without even needing to involve law enforcement. So just curious to hear from you, again, some of what you envision, or if you have heard of any models of this in other parts of the country that you might think we should look into.
So what we were discussing as far as how to avoid having the police department come out for calls that they may not need to come out for is maybe having a hotline. So even if someone dialed 911, knowing when to ask for mental health services or child welfare services will be appropriate. Or if they just call the hotline, if we just had a hotline system that we can dispatch the calls to, a lot of times you don't need the police department to come to handle something that maybe the person needs mental health or child welfare may be involved, or even just having a community service officer, right? Because a lot of us on this call, especially us that's in the community, we work so well with the different families in the community that we may be able to de-escalate a situation without even involving any of the police, any of mental health or child welfare. So we're just trying to imagine how it can look without having the police always come to situations that sometimes makes it worse.
And I just want to add on to that, recently we just saw horribly all over the news the response to the 9-year-old girl out in Rochester being maced and thrown in the back of a police car. I think when I watched the video, I probably saw about 7 police cars that were there, and she's only 9. I think that if a social worker or a therapist would have approached the situation, their patience may have been a little bit longer than those officers that were there, and we probably could have got a different result. And so when you have officers that arrive in those type of domestic situations, their presence sometimes could be intimidating. When, like Deborah just said, when you have, or in opposed to having a community member who may know the family, who may bring in a different type of presence.
Kevin Pryor. I was just talking to one of my friends in the Florida PD, and she told me that they have a mental health crisis, and that's what Deborah was talking about. The dispatch should know when she received a call who she should dispatch, and if it's a mental situation, she should know she should dispatch a mental crisis or contact the mental crisis, the mental health crisis people to go and pay attention to that.
Okay, thank you for that.
Laura, would you like to go next?
Hi, Laura Bauer, Rensselaer County Probation Department. Jerry, thank you for your remarks, and great group. Your committee has a lot of great thoughts, I think. The one thing that intrigued me was your suggestion of being involved in reentry or reintegration. That's a term we refer to when we're bringing youth back into the community from placement outside their home. Can you talk to me a little bit about what you envision your being part of that process, what that would look like, or what you're looking for as far as re-entry or reintegration?
I'm going to defer that one to Steve, that question.
Yeah, so what we mean by that is, in the reentry, a lot of times these young individuals come out and are not being directed in the right location, the right direction. So what would be helpful is that we first establish a stronger relationship, and provide them resources such as workforce development, helping them get back into the workforce, and being transparent when it comes to them and helping them get a job. Because a lot of times the youth that's coming back out, that has encountered with law enforcement, it kind of builds a barrier for them getting employment and things like that. I think is more of a building a strong relationship, and giving them that opportunity and more resources for them to be able to be employable and be able to be successful.
And I just want to add on to the end of that. Thank you, Steve, for that excellent response. Also, housing is another area that's always in question when dealing with individuals who are returning back to society. I know at one point in time there was housing here. I think it was through maybe Father Young. I'm not sure, but we were able to provide housing or have programs that provided a housing, should I say. Establishing a strong program where we can actually make contact with these individuals prior to their release from prison, so that when they do come home or they do come back to the city, they're not caught in somewhat like a culture shock. And they're running around with not a lot of assistance. So I think that's imperative, is the housing and building that relationship, tag on to what Steve said.
Thank
Carrie,
you.
can I add something? This is Deborah. So I think though, obviously what Jerry and Steve said, like this, definitely important. I also think that it's important to set up counseling, right? Because when a person is locked up, their mindset is completely different from when they are out in the community, right? So if you have a person, and I'm not talking about somebody that was maybe in there for maybe a month or two, I'm talking about maybe they was in there for 5 years, you have to retrain your thoughts. You know what I mean? Like when you're in prison, you're in a different mindset. So I think that it would be beneficial to add, housing, workforce development, education, maybe this was a teen that was finishing school, but got caught up in the mix of finishing school, preparing them for that, and then adding on some counseling, whether it's through mental health, especially if they can get counseling with counselors that look like them. That is so important and is imperative for people to be able to work with people, with people that look like them sometimes, because you kind of understand the trauma that they're dealing with. But when they come home, they have to, it's like a fresh start. They have to figure things out. So you have all these things on their plate that they got to figure out, but no one ever really thinks about their mindset. So I think that that's important.
I wanted to touch that too. Also, I think what's really, really important, I experienced this working with the youth, we need to have better accessible to social services. I have a lot of these kids that come home from jail or comes from diverse background where we have a missing parent, and we having trouble trying to get them resources because they don't have a birth certificate, because they don't have an ID. But a lot of these are a struggle. A lot of these are born in New York City and having trouble to get out there. And it's like, we understand social services, yes, have a certain, criteria, they have certain, but it just makes it a lot harder. So there's some way we can create an easier process, at least for these individuals that doesn't have these resources, and try to connect us. That would be very, very helpful, because I can count numbers of times where I've walked into, the social services building. I've been there 3 hours and we weren't able to accomplish anything because, there's a missing parent, or there's a missing document that it's just pretty much hard to get. So we definitely need better access, at least in that situation, when it comes to social services and other resources, whether it's food stamps, whether housing, and things of that nature.
And can I add on to that, to the probation department? Years ago, the probation department utilized the programs that was in the city of Troy when their kids were in trouble and before they would be placed. I don't see you guys utilizing the programs right now to help these kids, because though the majority of these kids are coming from our neighborhoods, and they're just pretty much left to fend for themselves. So if they're left to fend for themselves, they're going to do what everybody else is doing, no matter if they're on probation or not, because it seems like to them that you guys don't care about them, the society don't care about them, and nobody's there to help them or love them. So my suggestion is for you guys to utilize the programs that's in existence right now in the city of Troy.
Hello. Am I able to jump in? My name is Stacy.
Yeah, Stacy.
Yeah, you're good.
Yep, go right ahead, Stacy.
If it's okay, I actually used to be a probation officer for Albany County, and I was in the diversion unit with youth. One thing I would like to say is, I can't speak for Rensselaer County, but it's so important that these young people see people that are supervising them look like them or come from their similar backgrounds. And I know that when I was a probation officer, there may have been probably 3 persons of color that were in supervision for diversion units. And it's so important that we have more people, Black and brown people, that are that have these type of jobs, because it's important that we see things through somebody, another set of lenses, And I don't know if anybody's been paying attention, but even like with our president, our current president, he said he wants to make his cabinet look like America. And I think that's one of the problems, is that it doesn't. And, you know, I just feel that, you know, with all these, there's a lot of youth out here, and it would be so helpful to them if they could just see somebody that looks like them. And I think that they would appreciate it more. And, you know, I'm saying this because I used to work in diversion, and I'm familiar with all of the support services and things that are out there for youth. But, you know, they have to, the people that work in these units, they have to care about these kids. It can't be just like an 8 to 4 job. You know, I'm here as a probation officer. That's it. Some of these officers, or, you know, the hiring process, they need to make these departments look like America, look like who you are actually servicing. So that's one thing I would like to say. And I'm only saying that because of the type of work that I used to do. It's just very important.
I agree with you. It is very important. Yes, the makeup of our department and probably Albany County is not up to par with the amount of people of color that we probably should have to equal the youth that we work with in diversion. So that is one thing I wanted to say to the committee also is we would love for more people to take the civil service tests to be available for, you know, for people we could hire. So if you have any suggestions on how we can recruit probation officers, that would be great. Back to the reentry. You mentioned the DA's office, and they do have a reentry coordinator. I don't know if you've ever met Casey Hull, but she does a lot of the, or attempts to do a lot of the connections for people coming out of incarceration with housing and counseling, and working with Department of Corrections, community supervision to make people more successful when they get out. So she's a person we would definitely want this committee to connect with. And yeah, so Kevin, the more programming we can get for youth, the better. And when youth come out of placement, having them re-engage with the community in a positive way is critical for them to be successful when they come back out. So school is a big part of that too, and employment, like you said. But thank you very much for your
I do want to
comments.
note really quick that we do have well, I know myself has a relationship or has contacted Casey on a few occasions in regards to people who come home to Troy. And a lot of times, you know, they're referred over to Albany County because of the lack of resources that we do have here in Troy. So I do want to note that I have, you know, there is no, a lot of times the Joseph House doesn't have the capacity to house them. And so they're sent over to the Mission in Albany due to housing, inadequacy in housing. And I just wanted to just make that be known and just touch on the fact that when we provide these types of safety nets, we lower the recidivism rate, and we lower the contact, the probability of another police contact when we put this safety net in place.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you. We'll go to Chris next.
Hi, Chris Burke with Unity House. I want to start by saying that, Jerry, you and your committee, I thought, laid out a blueprint that I would accept every part of it in my opinion, in terms of what should be in a plan to reimagine the way things should be. I thought you laid out a very apt blueprint, and every component was right on. I want to comment on the composition of the committee comments. And I want to reflect on it by talking about Unity House. So at Unity House, we have 10 of our 10 top managers, they are all white. Of our 20 top managers, we have one person of color. And if we are not to acknowledge that we've got a problem, we will be in that same position 30 years from now. And I think what's reflective at Unity House is reflective everywhere where you have an organization that is built up largely by people not of color, by white people. And it takes intention. First of all, it takes acknowledgement that there's a problem, just like you said. Systematic racism is everywhere. And not to be ashamed of that, but to embrace it, because it's not like you're different than anybody else. It's just everywhere. And it certainly is at Unity House. We've got a lot of work to do to try to, you know, and it's not going to happen overnight. You said it's an ongoing process. It's definitely a process. But part of it starts with who we hire to begin with. And we've been doing a better job at that and working really hard at it, but we have to work really hard at creating avenues for promotion, moving up in the organization, getting into leadership, or what we put out is going to be a reflection of, you know, what we look like. So I just want to acknowledge that comment. I say that I very much agree with it. And sometimes politics gets in the way of being able to make statements. But it's important to somehow find a way to acknowledge there's a problem and to do something about it. And the composition of this committee is largely chosen by position. And, you know, just like everywhere else, most of the people in leadership positions are white. And, you know, so if we can change that, then we'll start to see a lot of things change. And there's so many other things I could comment on. I love what you had to say, but I know we're running out of time, so I'll pass it on.
Thank you. Deputy Police Chief DeWolf.
Yes. I didn't have a question.
Okay.
Did you want me to respond to something?
No, just if you had a question for the
okay.
for this group. Okay. So we will move on to.
Can I just jump in real quick?
Yep.
I don't want to let the opportunity go by. I do want to thank you, Chris, for being open like that. I like the way you did that. That was very transparent. I do want to thank you for your comments that you made.
Thank you, Jerry. Stacy?
No, I don't have a question right now. There's a lot that was said and a lot that has to be digested. And, you know, I'm listening, and I have a lot on my mind, a lot of thoughts regarding what Jerry said. So.
Okay.
Can I say something to about that for Unity House? Chris Burke, he took a chance with me and my organization, my program in there, because we had he has mental health and stuff like that Unity House deal with, but he never had the component that we brought. We brought young kids of diverse backgrounds, and the thing is like it still had a trust factor. It still had a trust factor to me, because I constantly I constantly just had to ask for things that seemed like it was a trust factor. Like we're gonna give you one key, Bob, but I have 3 more people that need to get in the building, where we sat down and we interviewed with you guys and you guys signed off on it, but it was like pulling teeth. But I'm just pleased about you giving us the opportunity, but we definitely just more. We got to if we're going to invite us in, we can't have a scope on us, because I mean we're there 2 years and we'll still have one key thought to get in the building. But thank you anyways. I appreciate your honesty.
Deputy Mayor, we'll go over to you.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, everybody, for being here again. And then also thank you to the coalition for your thoughts. Jerry or Renee, I'm hopeful that maybe you'll be able to send us that document just so we can reflect upon it as well, too, if that's a possibility.
We'll work on that. Yes, We'll get
Okay,
that.
perfect. Yep, you can do your little typos and like, if it's one of my, I get it. I get it.
Okay.
So I just had a couple because you ripped through them pretty quick. And they both go back to the hiring processes because I know that that's one of the things that we've been talking about in our monthly meetings. And you mentioned something under your heading of transparency, and then there was a second one under trust. I think the transparency one had something to do with the hiring process of the police department. And then the one under trust was something else and I missed it. So could you hit upon that again if you could, or maybe you can just send it in the document and highlight it?
Okay. So the one, Steve, you want to answer it?
Yeah, so the one for the transparency with law enforcement is establishing intentional relationship with the chief of police and the district attorney. The relationship should establish an active diversion program for the youth, a re-entry program for release ex-offenders. For example, establish a functioning police objective review board with subpoena authority. Educate the community on their rights when dealing with law enforcement. We would like to make it home. Put the information in writing with your seal of endorsement to make it clear that this is a legitimate information. Work with the community advocacy organizations to challenge and change laws that does not work for the community. For example, the hiring process that hinders creating diversity within the law enforcement agency.
So on that, is there a specific hurdle that you know of? And I'm asking it because I want to drill into that a little bit because I know this is also a topic of conversation on the other side of the river. And then I guess it would be the same question because it's all essentially civil service based, because I think there was another one under trust that had a very similar, similar feedback, right?
I can, let me answer.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, on the one I talk, the answer to the one about the hurdles, specifically, it is dealing with the civil service component and dealing with the inequities in terms of education and knowledge of how to navigate the process. A lot of times, folks or people of color will probably struggle with that exam, and I know that exceptions can be made or changes can be made to allow them an opportunity to intern into a position and gain skills and knowledge and work their way into that. So that was the thought behind that.
Okay.
Not to do away, but maybe add on or augment or create a pathway to employment opportunities.
Okay.
We just ask everyone to mute if you're not speaking. We're just getting some feedback.
Hopefully it's not coming from the apartment I'm in. And then, I know when we meet, we have Snug that usually joins us as well too. Sadeja and Kenja come in. Do they do, and I know they do a lot of, what's the word I was going to say? Interruption isn't the right word, but
Intervention?
Yeah, intervention. Yeah, intervention services. Sorry, I was struggling for that word.
They do interruption too.
Interruption, yeah. Do they do any transition programs as we're thinking about? Because I mean, you all know how I think that there's strength in partnerships, and I think that that's part of the value of our community as well too. Is that we do have so many partnerships out there. Yes, there needs to be strength in a strengthening of the relationships and maybe an updating of policies and technologies. But again, I just wondered because Snug was also looking to, kind of take a more prominent spot, I would say, a re-entry into it. Do they have any transition programs?
I know they do a lot over there, but I think a lot of times they have to end up going into Albany County. That is a huge hurdle in Troy, that there's not a lot of resources here. We have DSS, we have really that's the only option they really have. We have like the food pantries, but a lot of times when the Snug workers are servicing their participants, they're taking them into Albany to do a lot of the things because we don't have it here.
And
Okay.
I think most of the funding resources come from Albany.
Correct.
No,
Correct.
well, they
First-
have, I
first
mean, but
nug?
it's because it's not established here, that's why.
Right, right.
Yeah.
It's not
And so that's
established.
when we mention in our document the reallocation of funding so that we can create this triage type program, so that we're not directing residents of Troy and Rensselaer County over to Albany. We need those resources here. A lot of those resources, especially reentry, those safety nets, are in Albany County, and SNUG has to send those individuals over to Trinity to get the support that they need. That's when we call for the reallocation of funding so that we can have better programming.
And
Okay.
I can attest to that. And sometimes, believe it or not, we're left at a dead end. For example, I had a 17-year-old youth that was homeless. The only program that would help was Equinox. However, Equinox was they was over capacity and didn't have no space.
Do you
Wasn't a runaway kid. You know, I know we have like St. Anne's, and some of these shelters have qualifications that just doesn't fall under that category. So it leaves it in a tough situation.
So if you had to prioritize an age group for those services that are being chased into Albany, would your priority be for youth, like that 17-year-old that you're talking about? Or, and I hate to say it like that,
Yeah.
but you know what I mean? Like,
No,
that,
yes,
you know,
I would say 17 to 24.
I was gonna say, yeah.
I think 15 is a good
Because
age.
15, yeah, because I had a 21-year-old where he couldn't even go to Equinox.
Because
Okay.
Right.
Okay, so it sounds like we need to do a little digging into what those resources, and maybe with all the partners that are on here, that's something that we could take a review of what, almost take a stock of what's here versus what is being diverted to Albany, or what Albany County has and we might not see. And then one last question, because you know everybody on here knows I always ask questions. The Youth Council. So I know that this has come up in other conversations. It didn't specifically come up today, but there was a lot of conversation about youth. I guess my question to you is, if there was a youth council that was able to be created in the city, do you think it is more beneficial to have it become an organization like yourselves, where it's separate and apart from the city? Or is it something better that it becomes a part of the city, like almost like an ad hoc council, so to speak? Or is it both? I guess I would just like, because I know, Deb, you and I have had conversations about this a lot. And I guess I just want to kind of explore that a little bit, because what that also does is it either gives them knowledge into process, or at least connections to people, but also starts getting their voices heard on a bigger platform. So any thoughts from any of you on that?
I think that it's beneficial for it to be separate and have someone from that core group go back into like maybe the council or to the mayor and like deliver a summary. And the reason why I say separate is because you want them to be able to be as open as possible. You don't want them to have a shutdown moment because of certain people that's in the room. The thing is that the youth don't trust the police officers, you know what I mean? And the only way you can break that cycle is by building up trust. I'm all for a youth council. I'm like all for it. I think that'd be so beneficial, because you got a lot of kids that are not able to express how they feel. And they're the ones who we get our information from them.
Right.
You know, so.
Okay.
Can I say something about that?
Yes, sir.
All the programs that was in the city of Troy, the LEAP program, I mean, the coalition was talking about this the other night, where I explained to them how Colleen Goldstein and Ruthie Harnick and Mark, the police officer, community policing, had these outstanding programs where they just disappeared. I know everything is about funding, but when you're really concerned about the youth or the people in the city of Troy, it should be some way to get funding so these programs can continue, because you see what happens when they're not continued. You see a lot of violence, a lot of murders, a lot of kids being in places where they don't want to be, but they have to be there. It just boggles my mind when, just looking at the city of Troy, there's no programs at all in the North Central Troy area for the young people. So that's my thing about this. We have to create these now. We can't wait because we can't depend on a Troy Boys and Girls Club. We have to have a facility with our faces in it as well, ran by us. We can't depend on a Troy Boys and Girls Club, and we bring in our programs there. We need some place in those neighborhoods like it used to be, like the Weed and Seed, efficient and effective. People had some place to go. The kids' parents wasn't so worried because they knew they had a place to go. So that's what I think we gotta just really focus on now getting that money when the CDBG funding or whatever comes around. We need to make sure we have funding to do programs so we don't never ever need to leave our Black and brown children out in the cold when other kids from Brunswick or wherever are having a good time. So that's how I feel.
Understood. And so I guess what I'll do is I'll go back to the chiefs and find out. So you're talking about specifically when they ran like this, the North Station and the work that they did out of the North Station, Kevin?
Yeah,
Right?
I'm talking about the,
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
No, well, because I mean, if you want to find, and I'm going to say the word parity loosely, because that was also 20 plus years ago versus what today is, you know what I mean? And the programming is different and funding streams, like you said, are different. That was a long time ago, Kevin. We were much younger people back then.
But the thing is, again, I've been doing some research, and I called my friends who works for police, law enforcement in other cities and states. And my friend that works for Florida police, Atlanta, she said they raised the money. They raised the money to have a facility and have all these different things: job, education, job fair, education, everything.
Understood.
So,
understood.
I mean, even though we don't get funding, we have to just find another way to get it. That's all.
No, absolutely. And we've had these conversations, and that's it. But I guess that's what I'm asking is, part of what we have to do, and we've had that conversation before, is what does that programming mean, right? And what does it entail? And you just gave me some examples. You were talking about the stuff that they used to do out of the North Station. And I think that's some of the specificity that we have to get to start launching onto that so that we can allocate or raise or diversify fundings to get to that point.
But
Okay.
you said 20 years. So you said 20 years. No, I'm just saying, no matter how long it's been since those programs were in existence, say 10 years, there haven't been nothing going on in 10 years but the Boys and Girls Club.
Okay.
No, I mean, there's been funding and we'll go
Okay.
through that off of this. All right. And then that's it.
Deputy
That's
Mayor.
it.
Okay. All right. So let's
Just say this
go
real
ahead and
quick.
move.
Really quick, I'll be very fast and brief. When we talk about the hiring process, I feel that there needs to be a better connection with the high schools so that we are recruiting for these positions. We talk about, a lot of departments such as probation, such as the police department, not looking like the community that it serves. A lot of times in school, my son is a senior right now. They're all being bombarded with college. And there's a lot of great local jobs that don't require a college degree. And so if our probation officers and our police officers, if they could establish a better relationship with our schools here in the city of Troy, you may be able to get youth from the community to actually walk into some of these positions. I know that that's something that is working down in Atlanta. They call it the at Promise program, not at risk, but at Promise program. And they have a relationship between police, schools, and local government where they've taken the initiative to make this safety net for our youth. I just wanted to drop that in real quick.
And I want to just piggyback because this is very important also. So what Jerry is expressing is happening everywhere. So years ago in New York City, there was a high school called Transit High. Anybody from New York City would know Transit High. When you went to the school, you automatically got a job when you graduated with the MTA. MTA is a New York City job. So you're setting up an 18-year-old, 17-year-old, 18-year-old with a New York City job with a pension, which means that if they work a good 20 years, by the time they turn 40 years old, they can retire and and do something else and move around. And so that's important to kind of get them at like that 15-year-old age where they don't really know what they want to do yet. But if you can kind of give them some information and tools, they could kind of go into steps. And I just want to share this real quick and I'll stop talking. I had my 10-year-old when they was on the Christmas break, I had him go, I told him, tell me what you want to be when you grow up. and he said he wanted to do something with gaming. I made him go to bls.gov and I made him look up what that job entails, how much money you're gonna make, what you can, what you need to get, what degree you need to get to that point. And I did that just to open up his mind. He's only 10. He may not even want to do that when he get older, but it's just to give him an idea. So I think that's best that we start doing that with the youth. So what Jerry is speaking of is like, you're kind of setting them up. You're kind of guiding them to be able to direct their own path.
Okay, thank you. We're going to go to Council President Mantello.
Thank you. And Jerry, you took the question from me, one of my questions, and that was, what would you recommend to get more youth interested in applying to become a police officer? I want to thank Jerry, Deb, Kevin, Steve, and Stacy. A couple things that you mentioned, the walk in the beat, the police chief and I have talked about this quite a bit. I've talked to other officers, and I do know that the chief wants to implement this more. One of the things I think that we're seeing is some of the new officers who have recently been hired. The chief and the command officers actually have to work with these officers to get them out of the cars more. As you know, my dad was a cop and a detective. Everyone knew my dad's name along his beat. I firmly believe in park, walk, and talk. My two questions, I actually had three, and I'll go very quick because I know we're short on time. But one was the hiring. I do know that the firefighters, Chief McMahon, does go into our schools, had a partnership, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Mayor, at a later time with Hudson Valley to also try to develop a program. But we need to somehow encourage more youth, young, as Deb mentioned, 9, 10-year-olds on the advantages, hopefully, of becoming a police officer and get them more motivated. One of the things, what do you think about potentially a program to try to get our police officers to actually live in the city of Troy and try to incentivize them into living in our neighborhoods? We all know that the present laws, it's an adjoining county and it's bounded by state law and through their contract. So what would you think maybe of a program to encourage our officers to actually live in our neighborhoods and create some type of housing incentive? I do know other states in other communities do have a program like this. So that would be number one. And then number two, Renee mentioned it last week and it does concern me, and that's the PRCC makeup. And you mentioned it tonight, Jerry, and now it's even doubly concerned me. If something could be changed to incorporate a couple community members, if the mayor was open to that idea, I would be open to anyone that the two of you suggest, maybe one or two folks that you feel might help this committee, because our goal is this is going to be a working document. So come April 1st, it's not the be all end all. However, the council has to approve this. And if there's a real concern from all of you on the makeup, we need to know that, we need to hear it, and we need to be open to modify that. So thank you.
Can I address just the first question and then I'll let you guys. So you mentioned about the hiring and how Chief, has a partnership. I personally think the city of Troy lacks on how we deliver this information to the people. We'll throw it once on the internet. There was some information in the past where it was thrown in the newspaper and it was never people really didn't access it until we made a voice on this certain information that was let out. And then finally it was exposed to social media. So I think we have to do better delivering the message, doing events where we're promoting, opportunities when there's opening in the police department, when there's opening in the fire department, we need to, gather together, get with the police department and promote it and make sure that the information is being delivered effectively and the people are receiving it.
Can I jump in real quick about the
Thanks,
police
Steve.
walking the beat? I remember that, Carmela, when I was growing up, when the police officer would walk the beat. But one of the things that Chicago was doing, again, I did some research on them, and their new officers would go to the Black and brown neighborhoods where the problems were, and that's where they would spend their time at. They wouldn't spend their time in Sickaway, Brunswick, or none of that. They would spend their time in those neighborhoods, getting to know the people there, getting to know their culture. And I think that would be effective and efficient, because now while they're there, the kids have the opportunity to get to know the police officer and really understand and hear that, it's really not the police officer's fault per se when the cops come and grab your father out the house. It's both of our faults, because if we're not telling our children our father was a criminal when the cops came, now the kids hate the police. So I think it would be effective and efficient if these new recruits or police officers now today that's not from Troy go in these neighborhoods and go there, hang out, talk to the people like your father once did.
And the living part,
Thank
I
you.
don't think any of us touched on the living part. I think it's essential to live, for the police officers to live where they work at, right? Especially someone new coming on. You figure if you got somebody that's living in the area that they, maybe a rural area where they don't know like the inner city, they may be in their defense, they may be a little traumatized. And it's not so much about a color at that point. It's like, I don't know this. Like, and I'll use myself as an example. And I'm not a police officer, but when I first moved to Troy, New York, I kept saying, I can't live nowhere where there ain't no corner store, because I kept seeing all these gas stations. New York City don't have a bunch of gas stations, So I think that it's important to live, work where you live at if you're a police officer. Not to mention, you get to know your neighbors. You get to know, like, they can be the community servants. You know what I mean? Like how pretty much like we are. We know the community because we actually put ourselves in those shoes to advocate for them. We participate with them. If you're working as a police officer, but then you have to come home to the same area, you could kind of understand what you're dealing with. If you get a call for so-and-so drunk and acting silly in front of the building, that's John. He always do that. Let me go walk him to his building and make sure he got home safely. So I think that's important.
Thank you.
Kevin, do you have any questions?
Oh, I already spoke. Thank you.
Oh,
Hey, Kevin.
I was go-
Because
Oh, I'm sorry,
You got
Kevin.
two Kevins
That's all right.
tonight.
That's all right. I'm Kevin O'Connor, the director of Joseph's House and Shelter. Next time, I think tomorrow we should start from the Z and work back, because we're going to get shortchanged all the time here. These are real good questions. So I first want to mention that Joseph's House is an active participant in the Rensselaer County Reentry Task Force. And I think it's a shame that a homeless shelter has to be one of the primary servers in that kind of a function. Last year, we were able to accommodate 55 people coming out of incarceration. We could fill our shelter plus. And I think housing, you touched it well. So I think we shouldn't go too much farther by acknowledging that we need to develop a lot more housing. In the old days, there was transitional housing and there were services for folks, and there have been significant cutbacks. Even this year, the Rensselaer County task force got cut, some significant cutbacks because of the state funding. So I think that's a priority I would agree with. I certainly, we deal a lot with folks with mental health disorders, and about half the folks in our shelter, and then we have specialized housing that works with folks. And what happened in Rochester last March and became aware a few months later with Daniel Prude, my heart stopped when I saw that, because I don't want that happening here. I'm glad to be part of the emotionally distressed persons response team steering committee, and I think I think we need to go a long way to figure out an alternative. We deal with the police all the time with those wellness calls or the hospitalization calls. They're frustrated. We're frustrated. It's not an easy situation. So I agree with all that. I just want to go back to that core question of how do we build trust? How we build trust with the teens. It's not just programming. It's not just officer jobs. I mean, I commend Chris talking about the systemic racism that he recognizes in his agency. I recognize it in ours as well. And I think every institution has systemic racism, whether it's legacy or unconscious bias, but it really exists in. So how do we turn that around? How do we turn that around with our kids? Because the kids aren't going to look at employment as a police officer just because somebody comes and talks to them. I think it's a bigger trust issue. So how do you build that trust with the teens?
I think that it's presence, and somebody else can tag in, but I definitely think it's the presence, right? Like, not just Kevin Pryor faithfully invites the Troy Police, the fire department to any event he got going on. Same thing as Jerry Ford, right? So inviting somebody to come to something versus being a part of it is two different things. I can invite you over all the time, but if you're helping me plan or you're participating, like, what about like having them coach a baseball team at the Detroit Central Little League? You know what I mean? Like, those things like that I think is important. And I know that there is, they still have to work, but that's part of the work. You know what I mean? That's gonna help somebody build. My son was excited when he seen a police officer during the summertime. And I think it was because he never saw a Black police officer in Troy. I'm just be honest. He was just like, hey, like, I was like, okay, like, we're always at events, but he was excited. So I think it's the presence.
Yeah, I can attest to that too. The presence, the interaction, and kind of having them step out of their comfort zone, and wanting to build that relationship, not just showing up, just to show up, but interacting, coming out of their comfort zone a little bit, and making it known, like, what are their purpose of serving, or why they took the job they wanted to take, being a police officer, to protect, serve, and to be there for the community, and really showing their integrity. So I think it's more of, getting out of their comfort zone and being able to relate to them and build that strong relationship.
Before you say something, Jerry, can I just say this before I forget? And I think it's possible, right, to be present, because Hope Deputy Chief DeWolf don't mind me put him on the spot a little bit, but he checks on me. My car got shot up. Some fool shot my car up. He called and he checked on me when he seen that my name was, I guess, in a police report. So to me, that was showing presence, right? I'm not a 10-year-old kid, but it just made me know that I mattered at that moment. And he seemed to want to check in on me. So that to me is presence.
To me, one of the key elements is relationship. So like the community, you find the community members that are leaders in the community, and then you make relationship with them, and those becomes like the entry level for certain organizations that may, like the police department, that may be on the outside. And so when people tend to trust people tend to trust others whom how can I say this? If I don't know an individual and Kevin knows him and Kevin tell me he all right, I'm gonna assume that he's all right because Kevin told me he's all right. So we use those relationships, we use those ties that bind us, the common thread. And when we're talking about trust, if we can all like figure out how we can come and link together, and then I may be able to walk you into some rooms that you may not be able to walk in, and vice versa. You may be able to walk me into some rooms based on the trust factor. So I think, as we continue to build these strong relationships one with another, and we can tear down some walls and some barriers.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Chief Owens?
Thank you. There's certainly a lot we could talk about, and we have talked about some of it in our meetings through the North Central Community Groups and other groups. But just thank you for sharing your concerns. You've always been willing to let us know when we have events, when there's things that we can work on, and hopefully you've seen progress. I'm not going to say things have changed overnight, but hopefully you've seen things getting better. But more importantly than bringing up the concerns here tonight is the work that you do in the community each and every day. Not only your jobs, but your volunteering. You giving back to the community in ways that can never be calculated or any value assigned to it other than to know that you helped some child, some family, made their life better and gave them hope for the future. I think as we talk about everything tonight and as we'll talk about in the future, the police department is a part of the criminal justice system. It's a part of the larger society. And so a lot of what we're talking about, when we can work together and continue to build on the relationships that we already have, that's where we have the opportunity to make things better. And so we have a lot that you brought up tonight. There'll be a lot more that we bring up. So I won't get into all the details, but thank you again for sharing with us tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you. Jerry, did you want to? Okay. Renee, I know you've got two hats on tonight. Do you have any?
You know, I was sitting here trying to decide, should I say anything or should I not say anything? But I do want to say a couple of things. As folks know, I always have something to say. But first, I want to echo or also say, and I think Steve may have hit on this, is that communication is a big issue. And there are lots of opportunities, and I'm sitting here listening to what different groups are doing or different things that are available, but the communication and the connection to bring all of those things together is falling short. And this is not just a unique problem for Troy. I even have the problem within NAACP and getting information to and from people in the Black community or the community that I serve. So I think that's one of the things, is just to try to figure out, what's the best way to develop or what's the best way to communicate. And I know when I worked in the federal government, one of the things is that we had a communication plan. And so that would be something I would like to put on the table going forward, is that we develop a communication plan as a part of this committee. The other thing that I kind of picked up on, and I want to give kudos to Chief Owens and to the mayor for sponsoring the emotional distress response program. That program is great, and I would like to see that carried over to the community. And I think, that program will help with some of the issues that have come up here today in terms of providing assistance with mental health issues and becoming a little more sensitive and understanding biases and issues that are along that line. And with this emotional distress training program, I sat in on a couple of sessions, and it opened my eyes to different types of situations that are out there that I wasn't aware of, and how easily I, not being a police officer and under stress, could mistaken a certain situation as something that was more than what it was. And so I think that is something that really needs to be shared, not just with the police department, but with the others. The other thing that we had talked about that the TCBL group brought up is triaging things. And one of the things that we had talked about in our sessions is making sure that the police department have the right tools to do their job. We want them to stay safe. We want the community to be safe. And having the proper tools to do the work that is required is important. And so that's where that triage part came in. I just want to make sure that I reiterate that. Then I also want to touch on trust. When Kevin was talking about trust, and I thought back to when I visited a retreat, and they had an equine program. And part of that program was to develop trust between you and that horse. And so you're out there with this big, massive animal. For me, it's frightening because I'm a city girl. I know nothing about horses, but I had to develop, within a short period of time, I had to do something to get that horse to trust me, not to kick me and knock me all over the place, but to trust me and allow me to come in and brush his coat, So there are ways out there where we can work on developing trust. And basically what it boiled down to, and I'm going to simplify it. I do believe in the KISS theory, you know, keep it simple. It was just to be gentle, to show up and be open and listen and just to be alert. And that's all I'm going to say at this particular point. I'm going to turn it back over. And thank you guys so much for this opportunity.
Yeah, I just wanted to touch on that too about communication. I think there also a lack of language access in the community of Troy. And I can attain to that. I recently went to the Board of Elections to get a voter registration form in Spanish, and they didn't have any. I mean, how are we getting to those people that have language barriers, whether it's Spanish, whether it's the Asian community? I think we can work better, you know, when it comes to delivering message and accessible language, which because some is not easy, and you know, delivering information to them, whether it's voting, whether it's resources. I think we can't leave that community out as well, with language barriers and so forth. So not only getting the information out to the community, but also in those different backgrounds as well that have language barriers that, you know, that possibly could be a great police officer, but you know, don't have that information out there, or just resources in general. There's definitely a lack of that when it comes to language barriers in that community.
Okay, so just thank you, Stephen. Just for a process check, we started about 10 minutes later than expected. We have two more committee members. So I'm going to turn this over to Pastor Ralph and hope that we could stay on just a little bit longer because we started a little bit later. Does that work for everyone? Okay.
I'll just let everybody know we did resolve the YouTube issue, but at this point it's so late in the meeting that I'm not going to stream. We are recording this meeting, and the meeting will be posted on YouTube as right after the meeting is over.
Okay.
Thank you, John.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Jerry, for the presentation. I thought it was well laid out. I echo what Chris was saying concerning your presentation. I actually have quite a few things to say about that. I actually feel like an honorary coalition member. No, I'm joking. I'm joking. But one of the things that I did wanted to just comment on was relationship. As Jerry was going through his presentation, that's one of the things that kept sticking out in my mind, the relationship between the community and these different agencies and organizations and things of that nature. But also, I think that we have to do a better job with asking the question on our end. So for an example, when Kevin, asked the question about, you know, how do we develop the relationship, you know, with the youth? Like, is that a question that we are, you know, is that something that's brought to our tables, to our meetings? Like, what are we thinking about, you know, is this something that's often coming up, things of that nature? So, because to me, I'm choosing my words wisely. To me, I don't see some of the plans that were laid out in Jerry's presentation to be difficult. I don't see some of them to be difficult, especially when you start talking about programming. Those of you who know my background, I can create a program, give me 10 minutes, you know, and we'll be up and running. So I don't see, and developing relationships. I mean, look at, you know, when Deb got on the screen, she said, you know, I think I know everybody here. So what is the barrier between setting up what needs to be set up so that we can serve our community. We know that there are barriers, but what are those and why is it so difficult for us to, so those are just the thoughts that come into my mind. But yeah, that's all that I would say. I would like to read that again as well. So I know that they said there will be a copy sent out, but I won't take up a lot of time tonight. But thank you to the coalition.
Okay. Ken, next time we will go in reverse alphabetical order. So I will turn it over to you as
Yes,
Kevin requested.
I'm very used to going last, but thank you.
You could if you could introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm Ken Zalewski. I am the second council member on our coalition. I guess I wanted to make one comment briefly, and then I do have a question I wanted to ask, directed mostly to Jerry. Community policing, I think, addresses at least a part of the issue of having our police officers know the people that they are serving. I think in the past, we had a more robust community policing program in the city of Troy. I think it's been reduced over time. I think right now we only have 2 community police officers that serve the entire city. But I will say, I just want to speak up for the community police officer that I work with is Officer Chris Johnson, who just happens to be a Black police officer. He looks like the community that he's serving, and he's doing a lot of what we're talking about. He does get to know the people in the neighborhood. He's excellent the way he follows up on issues. I know he's diffused multiple situations that could have been worse. I don't think that's the be all and end all. I think we have work to do, but I just wanted to mention that I do really enjoy working with Chris, and he's been a pleasure, and he does get things done. That's actually a question I kind of wanted to ask, like, what do we all think of community policing, and do we need to build on it or change it in some way? But my real question, and this goes mostly to you, Jerry. Jerry, you're my constituent. You live in District 5. And I can tell you, like, I feel like as a council, I'm now speaking just as a legislator, that we've been taking steps to try and address some of these issues. And I think they're baby steps. And we get a lot of criticism that we have not done anything near what needs to be done. When it came to the budget process, we allocated money to an additional youth services officer because we wanted to put the emphasis on taking care of our youth versus putting another police officer on the streets. We couldn't do both. We had to pick one or the other. We created this Reimagine Troy Community Justice Services work group, which is a group of citizens that are also doing what we're doing here, discussing how we can reimagine policing in Troy. So we feel like we're taking steps, but we get a lot of criticism that we're just not doing enough. And I just want to know what you feel, and I guess anyone here, but specifically you, Jared, because you're my constituent, what you feel I can do as your representative more, and what the city council as a legislative body can do to address some of these issues.
Awesome. Thank you for bringing that up, Ken. And when you speak about that, as far as the budget goes and making that decision to add another youth service specialist, I think that was excellent. But drastic times call for drastic measures, and some cities, and I'm not quite sure what the percentage is here in Troy, but I do know that in some cities, like the police budget is almost half of the city budget. So I'm not sure what what portion the police budget here is in the city of Troy, but when you reallocate the funds and you're supporting the needs of the community, then you're going to need less police officers. The demilitarization of the police, taking, the army approach, and I know it's not that bad, but I've seen sometimes when they do the different things that they do, especially when it comes to the drug enforcement. I mean, it looks like sometimes like you're in the Middle East somewhere, you know, and to have that type of force on the streets for a lot of time minor drugs, it's not, you know, a mindset that you want to put on the people of the community. And so when we look at, you know, the budget, I'm glad you brought that up, man. Reallocating those funds, using those dollars to pour more into resources so that you don't need the police as much. I think that that's a better use of those dollars. And you yourself and the city council, I can say attest to that by the decision that you made to add another youth services individual instead of adding, you know, put more police to the streets. To your point, when you were speaking about District 5, relationships, like Pastor Ralph just said, it's relationships. It's about getting out to know the people. I've been here in District 5 for the last 14 years, 15 years. I'm a homeowner in this district. I own my own home for 7 years. I worship in this district. I'm right at United Ordained Church, right around the corner. And, you know, I feel like certain areas get the attention, you know. I feel like maybe the East Side gets more attention in District 5 and the Italian Community Center District and the Washington Park. But when you start to come back, Adams and 4th Street, those areas need as much love as the other areas, and they deserve as much love, should I say, and attention as the other areas. So it's about building those relationships and making your presence known. I get it that there's a lot of things that need to be done, like at the table, in the office, but you know, the people are out here, and you know, once you show people that you love them, you get a different response from them, you know. And I think that making yourself or making you know, other city leaders available so that the people can really get to know them and we can build those relationships is gonna go a long way. But I know that there are things, there are steps that have been done, but right now, it's like kind of like when we called, you know, when Kevin, I got to say, when Kevin called the meetings that we started, the North Central group, like that was desperate times. Like our young people were dying. Like there was, I mean, we had maybe at least 1 or 2 shootings a week. Like we would have a meeting on Monday or Tuesday, and we were talking about a shooting that happened last week. By the time the next week rolled around, we had 2 more shootings and another young person that lost their life. And so, you know, with the killing of young Black men, these are desperate times. So we can't like piecemeal it. We got to come up with something comprehensive and something robust that really addresses the matters.
Thanks, Jerry.
No problem at all. Anybody else from the coalition, y'all want to jump in and say anything to that piece? Please feel free.
I think you said it all, Jerry.
You turned it on and turned it back off, Deb,
Yeah.
if you're saying something.
Oh, I was just gonna say that I just want to make sure that I know that the council voted for in their budget for the youth coordinating positions, but I definitely want to make sure that we let it be known that I feel like we played a huge part in and what I mean by us, I mean by like myself, Jerry Ford, Monica, like we played a huge part with working with the administrative and trying to come up with stuff. So I just wanted to make sure that was said, especially because we're recording, because that's one thing that I'm so appreciative of, those meetings that I feel like, you know, we've been going, and Jerry, Miss Renee, they all can tell you, I kept saying, okay, we going to these meetings, what are we getting? Like I was starting to get drained because we was going to the meetings, these kids were getting killed. That was the one thing that I felt like, oh wow, we got something. So no disrespect to the council, especially not to you, Kim, because you brought it up, but I'm definitely, I don't know about nobody else, but I'm taking credit for some of that. Because I was sitting there at the meetings, leaving my children, you know, with their dad in the house for 2 hours because, you know, we can talk. So no disrespect, Kim, but I'm taking a little bit of credit. Thank you.
Take a lot of credit, Deb.
Yeah, you deserve the credit there.
Group, the whole group.
And I do want to say again, we do thank you for going above and beyond, because we were talking about one position and y'all added 2. But we just need a little bit more. We need a little bit more. We need more resources. We need more support for the grassroots organizations. We need more conversations around mental health. You know, we just need a little bit more. We need more reentry programs. We need more because we're in desperate times, and we don't want to lose not another Black person to with police from a police interaction. We don't want to do that again. We don't want to go down that street.
I just want to say one thing real quick on relationships and trust. If we're going to build a relationship with the police department and DA and whoever else the probation department, we got to really have the trust. We got to really know that the police department is going to consequence or take care of their people the way they're supposed to be taken care of as they would do us. We have to honestly be on that trust level. We can't just say we're going to do this and then something happen and then the police officer is not being consequence, or we take care of ours. We consequence ours. We make sure we talk to our people. That's all I want to say. We just have to be really on the same page. If we're gonna build these relationships, we really gotta all be on the same page with the trust. All right, because it doesn't work if we can just easily say it, but we have to live it and work it. All right, so that's all I have to say.
And just want to piggyback on what Kevin is saying. Part of trust is not having double standards. One set of rules for one group of people and a different set for another set of people, and those rules are different for the same type of offense, activity, opportunity, but you have two different sets of rules. That doesn't lend to building trust. And then also just being accountable. If you mess up, hey, I made a mistake. If you did good, take the credit like Ms. Deb did. Just being accountable.
Just like we tell our children about trust, and we tell our children always to tell the truth, accountability. If you broke that window, you tell the truth. All right, let's deal with it. But that's the thing. Just got to be accountable. Like Mrs. Renee said, if you messed up, you know what? It's better for the community to know that you're a man or woman enough to say, I messed up, and let's fix it and move forward, and not just let it linger and people, that's all.
So it's so challenging to jump in and shut down. I just think we're having very rich conversation, and I'm looking at the time, and I'd love to say, Jerry, thank you, Renee, Kevin, Stephen, Deborah, for being here and starting us off with our first affinity group meeting. And I don't know if there's any last words you'd like to say, and then we will move to our committee debrief.
Yes, I'll say one thing. Just in closing, when it comes to the committee, the city officials, I want you guys to really think about why are we here today, and think about what's going on and how this is going to impact the community. And when I say that, think about all the gun violence, all the people we have lost, Edson Evelyn. I mean, the list goes on. So when we making these decisions, when we creating these programs, when we passing these budgets, think about how impactful it's going into our community. That's all. Thank you.
Okay. So I think at this point, what we will do is we will say thank you very much to the coalition of Black leaders in Troy. Thank you for coming this evening, and we will go into a committee debrief.
Tamara,
John,
would you
I
like
think
me
you have
to?
to, yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to migrate some of the folks back over just to the attendee position. So it's going to prompt you to log back in. Okay.
Okay, so we are in the portion of the committee debrief at this point, and so some of the key questions are looking at, you know, what additional information do we think needs to be brought into the committee based on the discussion we just had, and then also just some, you know, some thoughts on the presentation.
Hello?
Hello, is that Stacy?
Yes, hi.
Hi, Stacy. You're
Hi.
on.
Okay, so what I wanted to say really was the one thing that was brought up is that they were concerned about the makeup of the group that was voiced. And what I would like to say basically is that some of the people that are in the police review board, there's been conversation on that other side, wondering or trying to understand like why they're not a part of this, or I just feel like there's some kind of disconnect with the communication with some of the people that are people of color on the police review board that I just wanted to bring up. And I just wanted to also say that it is so important that, for me even, that the police officers that we have working in our communities, you know, that they look like us and that they're qualified. Not that just that they look like us, but that they are qualified too for the positions. And I think that that would, you know, build on community trust. So I just wanted to add that.
Thank you, Stacy.
Can I just, one of the things that I think that I know that, and I will be the first one to tell you, the communications plan is something that I've long since been talking about. And everything we change and try it gets like 2 more people. So it's a challenge, right? Because there's so many different platforms. Nobody reads the news or watches the news anymore on traditional TV, and nobody reads the newspaper. So the trajectory of trying to get media and news out is difficult at best, and it's not an excuse. It's just that we were always open to thoughts and ideas, to the point where I email people directly, like just mass information out to community groups in my context in the city. The other piece of that too is Stacy, in regards to the police officer test. I know that this last test that was taken, what was it, a year ago? There was actually 350, I think, people who took that test. We did a huge push out into the community to get people to respond across the city. And there was a great response, actually really big response compared to other municipalities that had officers. What I think is important is to probably take a look and do some data research on the people who actually did respond and take the test. And I think it was a pretty successful test too at that. I think a lot of people passed that did take it, but it would be interesting to find, I did take a note on, you know, the demographics of the individuals who took the test, as well as including their geography. Are they Troy? Are they outside of Troy? So I think that that's one thing I do know that the mayor has been actively doing with both chiefs, including the fire department, of which we publicly acknowledge that it is not diverse at all. And that has been always a big challenge as well too.
So just to piggyback on that, Monica, I think it would be important to know, if we do poll people who took the test last time, find out where they learned of it, where they learned of that opportunity, because that's where we ought to pour more effort. It's been just really frustrating trying to diversify the workforce, but particularly police and fire departments where it's so important. So and I don't even know if I think the actual number of people who took tests was over 400. I think you undercounted when you said 350, but I don't know that we know the racial and gender composition of those who took the test. I don't know that we get to see that information. But maybe when people take the test, we could ask them how they learned of the testing opportunity, and we could use that to develop more outreach material, because something we did right for that, something we did for that test worked, I think.
I think, having specific demographic information would be helpful, and especially from my perspective, or for my perspective, knowing the racial makeup of the test takers would be helpful. And that would help to also understand how we can best communicate and get that outreach there out to those folks as well, just to help change the makeup of the different agencies, to have it reflect the people that that they serve. I think that's one of the goals that we've talked about in the presentation.
I'll see if we can get that. I'm not sure that we can. I know civil service law is very particular about what information we can look at. But if we can get that, I'll get it out.
Okay, great.
A question for either the chief or deputy chief. One of the participants, I think it was Kevin Pryor, brought up weed and seed. And, I remember years ago being on the weed and seed committee with Colleen Goldston. What happened with weed and seed? Was it just a program that got defunded? And if so, is it possible to bring it back?
That grant program, I think it was definitely cut back and then eliminated entirely. I don't know if it got absorbed into something else, but it was federal grant money awarded to localities. But absolutely, any program that we can provide other opportunities to engage in positive interactions with the community, we're all for that. And so at times, funding is a piece of it, but it's what does that funding do? Does that give us time? Does that give us people to have those opportunities to engage? And so where we're now authorized 131 sworn members, we don't have that completely filled. We're actually be doing some hiring in the next week or two. But that funding gives us that extra time for either members of community police unit or members of patrol to interact with different activities. I know Weed and Seed, they did activities within the community, within the neighborhoods, but then they also had trips like day trips, or even they had the Defy was another grant funded program, drug education for youth. And they actually had like camps, like week-long camps to give primarily youth opportunities, but it also had community members, maybe teenagers were involved as counselors. There's some sports programs you could run through that. So yes, it is a funding issue, but it's also that funding gives us, if it can't create extra people, it gives us extra time to have people devoted to those programs. So to answer your question, Weed and Seed did go away as funding. If there's other opportunities to fund that type of program, we'd be all for it.
Chief, what happened to Colleen herself?
Colleen's still here with the department. She's our field intelligence officer, so she works out of our detective bureau.
She was excellent. I mean, as Weed and Seed coordinator.
And what is Weed and Seed? What is that program?
It was a community program with the police department. So the weed concept was go in and clean up problems within the neighborhood.
Okay.
Build positive programs for future growth. So that was the thought process. Within it, we had a lot of youth programs. So there was opportunity for police officers, primarily the community policing unit, to engage with the community at positive interactions, not a response to a call, not where there's trouble. Go in, hey, this is something positive we can do. And we do that to a degree, but not nearly as robust as it was under those programs.
Yeah.
I think it's important to note there have been a lot of reductions in federal funding to localities over the past 20 years. And the city of Troy, because of its financial condition and frankly, because of its poverty rate, has been hard pressed to maintain those programs that were funded with federal dollars when they went away. So I do recall, I'm old enough to remember when the Weed and Seed program first came out, and there was some significant dollars that were made available to the city, not just Troy, but cities across the country. And Chris, you may recall 25 years ago when the city used to get $6 million a year from the CDBG program. And that funded youth programs and community centers. Adjusted for inflation, that would be over $13 million annually today. But what do we get from the CDBG today? Less than 2 million. So we just haven't had the ability to replace those lost federal funds with local funds. It's a real challenge. It's a real shame because it's gutted all of the programs that we've talked about tonight. All of the things that people have noted aren't here. And it's because we've lost that funding from the federal government. And we have to find ways to replace it. That's been a slog. It's been a slow process.
Council President.
Yeah, Tamara, I think one of the constant themes that I've heard tonight, and being a part of the North Central meetings, which have, I believe, truly been just huge in moving forward with the themes that I heard tonight, and that's trust. We heard it numerous times. So I think at least one part of the report, somehow we have to continue, I believe, these meetings. I think tonight was huge. I think everyone was really candid. And so, I mean, no one wants to meet just to meet, but I do believe that this group is just well-rounded, and I think it's great that the various groups can come in and speak frankly and talk candidly and tell us, issues that we can implement and things to look at. So I think the constant communication, even if they're quarterly meetings somehow, and that this group stays together somehow, but trust, I think, has built over the past 7 months. I don't know how long we've been meeting, Monica, maybe 6 months. And it's come a long way. Somehow we need to continue that. Just my thoughts.
We've been meeting since June, and I agree with you. It has made a big difference. And I have seen, results from our meetings. And I've seen, some differences in the community. So I agree with you. I think we do need to continue the meetings.
So we're about at time. Does anyone have anything else for tonight?
I'd be curious to know, from where I'm sitting, that was exactly what I wanted to hear tonight. I wanted to hear that kind of conversation. I wanted to hear big themes and specific ideas, and we got it. We got a handful of them, and that was great. Like everybody else, I'm looking forward to a written summary. I couldn't write fast enough. So Renee, if you can help pull that together, that would be appreciated.
Yeah.
So I hope they all go this way, and I'd be curious to know if other people feel similarly.
I feel similarly. I was also rapidly taking notes. I thought there was just a ton of, both big picture and detailed suggestions that are worthy of follow-up conversation. So I was pleased.
I was
Well,
struck by that as well, that there were big themes and then also very specific examples that I think are very helpful to the work that we're doing.
I will make sure that everyone gets a copy of, or get the transcript of what Jerry presented. I'll talk with him about getting that. And the questions that you guys posed to some of the things that were written in here were right on and in keeping with the thought process that was occurring here. And although I sat in the meetings, with them while they were developing this, there were some points that came up that I wasn't aware of, especially with the communication part that Steve brought up about the different languages. That was something that I hadn't even thought about, which I thought was good. And then just getting that information about the different programs. I would like to see maybe a comprehensive list of existing and defunct programs that have been out there to help support the community. I think that would be helpful with trying to reimagine or come up with something new. If we even need to do something new, we may have something in the closet we just need to dust off and reuse, but we don't know what it is. So I guess it's time to do a little spring cleaning, I guess is what I'm saying. Find out what we have and what we don't have.
So I think that's probably a good place to kind of end our debrief. And Mayor, should I turn it over to you? Do you want me to do just kind of what the upcoming things are and then turn it over to you to end?
Sure.
Okay, so we have Wednesday night, we have the public forum coming up. For those who are listening to this meeting, remember, if you want to speak, you need to go to the website and register for the Zoom meeting. And then also you have to fill out a form to have time to speak at the public forum. There will be one Wednesday night, and then next week on Monday, there will be another public forum. And then next Wednesday, we will have 2 more affinity group presentations coming up. So thank you everyone for your time tonight. It was good to facilitate this group and to hear from the coalition. So Mayor, I'll turn it over to you.
I'll be quick. I'd like to add my thanks as well to everybody on the committee, as well as all those out there listening that we can't see on our screen. Thank you for your attention to this important matter. I hope that the remaining sessions go as productively, and the decision to keep this group intact after April 1st, I think was confirmed tonight. There's a lot of stuff that will occupy us if we so choose to be occupied by it, and I hope we will. So again, thank you. And I'm sorry all this has to happen in Zoom. It's not my fault. I didn't invent COVID, but this just is a poor substitute for getting together in person. But it's the best we can do under the circumstances. So thank you for putting up with that as well.
Tamara, if I may chime in just very briefly, just as a reminder for everyone who is listening or watching on Zoom, again, this meeting is being recorded. It will be posted on the Police Reform and Reinvention Collaborative webpage. It will also be available on the city's YouTube page. If you're looking to get additional updates on things that are happening in the city, please do visit www.troyny.gov/connect. Sign up for email updates. We have thousands and thousands of people who receive email updates from us on a weekly basis. So if you aren't signed up and you're looking to stay involved with the work of this committee, or just find out what's going on in the city of Troy, please do add your email address there to get the most recent updates.
Okay. Well, thank you everyone. And we will see you all on Wednesday night for the first public forum.